Good morning, everybody. All right. Yes. Welcome to Young Conference 2023. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ryan Hicks. I have my partner in crime, Mr. Zach Fishman the Great, right here. You know, growing up, I always wanted to dunk, and so it looks like that's in realm of possibility right now. And then perhaps we're going to have some Olympics, some franchise Olympics. Well, thank you guys for being here. Thank you very much for being here. Couple of folks I want to recognize. The first one, I've already mentioned him, is Zach Fishman. He did a very good job at venue selection. Do you guys agree? So, what did you guys think about last night? Yeah, good job, Zach. Couple of other points of recognition. First and foremost, if you have not been to a Young Conference, stand up. Wow. Well, thank you guys for being here. And then if you have been, obviously you were not standing up, but raise your hand if you've been to a Young Conference every year since 2019. All right, I actually expected a little bit more than that. 2019 was the first year that we had Young Conference, and then in 2020 we had to go virtual. Was it 2020 we did it virtual? And then last year we did it in Fort Lauderdale, and we're probably going to camp it here in Chicago, but I'm really feeling the vibes of this venue. I want to also recognize and thank our committee, because this year we had a little bit of an organizing committee that we could bounce some of the programming off, and I think the committee did a really good job. So for the folks on the committee is Abby Gruber with Unleashed Brands. Oh, she's on the phone. We have Tony Zaccario with Stretch Zone. Ashley Mitchell with Streamline Brands, Jeff Horst with Rocket Barn. Thank you guys so much for putting up with Zach and I in the organizing committee. Did I miss anyone, Zach? Dean Hatzi Theodosio, my favorite name to say with Franchise Supplier Network, Dean as well. You just nailed it. That was pretty good. Yeah, it's Hatzi Theodosio. I learned that. Getting better. Zach, what else do we have?
Here, let me switch. So one thing we do want to illuminate is the amount of people in this room. We've never had this many people at a Young Conference before. We have a little over 150 people in total, which is awesome. As you guys know, this event is a little different. We kind of try to skew it to millennials and franchising. We know that is continuing to increase in numbers, but Lane and Brad made a comment where they had said, like, I didn't actually know that there was this many millennials in franchising in general that were executives. But Ryan and I really wanted to try and create an experience that allowed people to kind of interact with their peers and the next generation. And this is an example of what we always hoped it would be. So we're really, really happy for that. So thank you all for coming. Additionally, we, as you guys know, have a lot of other conferences aside from Young Conference. For those who have been to Unconference before, it's kind of like our franchise spring break. And then we also, Ryan coined that, and then we also have Springboard. We're going to talk about that in a second. We want to bring up the brain, the people really behind that, which are Lane and Brad, and we won't take credit for that. But Springboard is the biggest event that we have every year. For folks who's been to Springboard before, raise your hand if you have. Great. A good amount of the room, which I love. For folks who don't know what Springboard is, Lane and Brad are going to get into that momentarily. But once again, thank you all so much for being here. And I would be remiss if I did not thank all the people behind the scenes as well. In addition to our committee, we also have Tony and Amelia and Carly and Dana and all the awesome folks behind the scenes that are helping us to do all of the marketing and really trying to get you guys all revved up for this. So thank you to them as well. Without further ado, we're going to bring up Brad and Lane.
Good morning, everybody. So to give you a quick background, it was shocking to me how many people, this is their first time to Young Conference. And Zach is my oldest son, and my younger son is somewhere in the background. I can see him out there. And the way, yeah, it's always great to have Jake's here. But as this conference was started, Lane and I met at an IFA event back in the 90s. We were I was 35, Lane was 34 years old, and we grew up in this business together. And I thought it was a great way to grow up with our contemporaries, and now as we hit a little bit later in our age, I won't mention, but so I wanted a place for my kids to kind of get to know their contemporaries, and as you grow up in this franchise space, a place to get to know each other. Because it's a wonderful industry, great people, and that's how Young Conference came to be. The first year, Lane and I had to put man buns on and ripped jeans because we thought we were young. Now we have turned it over to them and let them run with it, and you guys have done a phenomenal job. So as that kind of mentioned, I saw that, who's been to Unconference here? So it's a smaller group. That is what you want to call our spring break. That was the original conference that we had put together. And most of the conferences that Lane and I have put together are because of things we talked about. We like to ski. So that's how Unconference came to be. A bunch of us were skiing. Springboard came together because we felt it's a great place for emerging franchisors to get to know each other. We're fortunate to have, Lane and I have a lot of friends in the franchise space, former chairman of the IFA, chairman of the IFA, who come and mentor people, speak. People that have come to Springboard now come and mentor because they've been there, 11 years, 10 years? This will be our 11th year. It's in September 27th through 29th in Philly. We will probably we started our first year, we hoped we were going to get 80 to 100. We had 130. Now we'll probably have 700 to 800 people. It's an awesome conference. We hope all you guys will join us for there. We take you, like here, we take you from morning to night. And that's the whole idea, because things like last night is where people really develop the relationships, not sitting in a room here at one table. We get to know everybody. So that's where we hope you'll join us September 27th to 29th, and I'll bring it up to Lane.
Brad, that was the best opening you ever did. You stole everything good. No, it's amazing. And so I think what we were trying to show through the different events is that this is really a community where people rely on one another. I don't think anybody in here would say that any one person help them achieve their goals, but we can see, because we've nurtured people, and people have come to these events for more than a decade. And in the last 2 years, I don't know if any of you heard, but the market got pretty exciting for franchisors, and we got to see, 40 or 50 springboarders who came from the first day they started and didn't know anybody to having, exited at in an amazing fashion. So it's a thing. This is not a thing where you're going to learn just from hearing the people talking. This is an interactive exchange. Everybody knows something. Everybody's in the 99th percentile of something and in the 1 percentile of other things. And so this whole purpose is to put the smartest people in the room, the people that are vetted, that we know have taken, suppliers that we know have taken other people through this process and with an amazing outcome, and try to make sure you get to see them, put franchisees in the room so you get some realism in terms of what, how people receive what you say and what you offer. And we're mostly grateful for people. We used to have to beg people to come. I will say, Brad, it has gotten a whole lot easier. And this event is really, Springboard particularly, and these offshoot events have become incredibly popular. And we hope you join us. Can I share your estimate of the number for September? Yeah, I mean, we had 5, what do we have?
We had 680 last year.
680?
Yeah.
So thanks for going to be in the 800. I mean, when we haven't even opened, I think, the registration site, I think that will cycle as this one ends. But we encourage you to register early, to present or write me or any of us with any stuff that we may not know what you're in the 99th percentile of, or what you're an amazing teacher at. So that's what this is. Write us back. Tell us, hey, I got a really great thing, or who you should talk to, this person that's got a really great angle on this stuff that people will really appreciate. Because we get credit for 2 things: turning over great content, and also having more of you all at every one of these events. So bring a friend, tell everybody. I know that's happened here a lot because when I ask people who brought you, it'll be like Zach or Ryan and someone who's here and who did the final tug. I know Red and other people here have been very much advocates for us. So I don't want to take up any more time. I really appreciate everybody coming. I really enjoyed last night, and I'm looking forward to tonight and the rest of the 2 days in terms of interaction. That's it.
So one last thing is this event is not possible without the sponsors. So thank you very much to the sponsors of this event. There is an app. It's Young Conference on the App Store. Download the app. Use that as a resource. Just toggle over to the sponsors tab and be sure you thank them. So thank you very much. Raise your hand if you're a sponsor for the event. Thank you, guys. And so I'm going to give it to Zach, and he can make formal introduction to our first speaker. I'll say a couple of words and say that I followed this speaker and watched some of his journey. I didn't know him, and you will learn a couple of really neat things that he's done. But I'll actually save that whole story. I'll tell you that one-on-one. But very much looking forward to today's content. Any other words on agenda? Anything that we need to go over?
No.
Cool. Well, I'll turn it to you. And
So just to give you guys context into this speaker, and I'll just reveal my age to everybody, it's fine. I'm 29 years old, and this speaker happens to be my age. We went to college together. So it was a really, really cool experience for me to find out one day that he was calling our SVP, who's now our COO at Fishman, saying, hey, I'd love to do some work with you guys. I background checked and I realized, is this the same Neil Hershman that I know? And then I figured out, lo and behold, he's now the CEO of 16 Handles. So I'm really, really happy to have on our first speaker, Mr. Neil Hershman, to join us today. Neil, come on up.
Nope. It's good. Can you hear me? Maybe? Mike? Is this on? Yeah? Okay, cool. It's hard to tell. Thank you. Thank you very much for the warm introduction, guys. My name's Neil Hershman. I'm the CEO of 16 Handles right now. I've had a few other roles. Can I turn this one off? Just opening up my laptop. I worked on these slides pretty late last night, as everything is. But first off, just like how many people are franchisees versus franchisors here? Can you raise your hand if you're a franchisee? Okay, good. That helps me target the right audience here. Mostly franchisors in the room. Everybody's awake, right? Like they didn't really do an icebreaker. You guys need to do an icebreaker. So I've got an 8-month-old daughter at home. She loves claps. So can we just do the easiest icebreaker of thunderclaps? Okay, thank you. Everyone's awake now, right? There we go. I think Zach wanted me to talk a little bit about how me and my chief brand officer ended up on the cover of Franchise Times last month. And you might recognize my partner, Danny Duncan. He's a famous YouTuber, I think 8 million subscribers, consistent following over the last decade, over $150 million of merchandise sales off of YouTube. So pretty crazy, insane guy. And that talk is kind of led into like, how do you market towards Gen Z and how do you get this audience into franchising? And it's a really good question. It's a question I keep getting asked being a younger person in franchising. But it's kind of an annoying question too, because like, I don't know, Gen Z, like the short answer is they want brands that are big, that are fun, that are ethical, and serve a good product. And is that any different than millennial audience or any other audience? No. Does that mean we're giving up on marketing to Gen Z or not doing anything unique? Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. We're throwing like so much paint at the wall and seeing what works. And this is a marketing stunt that cost us all of $5,000. It was putting a wrap on an old truck, and it's got $3.2 million views for like $5,000. I mean, it's crazy engagement that we can get. And so we are doing guerrilla marketing techniques and unique marketing. But all in all, there's nothing really special to it. And so what I really want to talk about is my story and my development throughout franchising and how I moved from a desk job in the banking industry to where I'm at today. And that starts with my feet. This is a bruised picture of my feet after a 131-mile run, which was preceded by a 560-mile bike, which was preceded by a 12-mile swim in November 2018. If you know what an Ironman triathlon is, this was 5 Ironmans concurrently. And this is a wide picture shot. I chose not to show the picture of my blisters, which oozed for days. Kidding, I'm gonna show you pictures of my blisters. So yeah, that was a quintuple ultra triathlon that took about 126 hours to compete, which is over 5 days of just nonstop sleep. Yeah, this was basically me operating on like maybe 6 hours of sleep over the past 72 hours, because if you sleep, that counts towards your race time, so you don't sleep, so you just keep moving. But at this point, I had a 1 hour lead, yeah, I mean, no matter what, it was just like stay focused, no matter the weather, the time, whatever it was. I wanted to transcend the training, transcend everything I knew about running, and sleep deprivation and kind of being a normal human, and running this 1 mile loop. These races are always on a looped course, so it's just a 1 mile loop over and over again for five marathons. And eventually that race ended, my feet healed. I got back to New York City, back to normal life, and that's when I did the most life-changing thing of my life. In November, that same month, is I executed an asset purchase agreement to buy a franchise called 16 Handles, a frozen yogurt shop in Midtown Manhattan. I had my attorney at the time take this picture, and he probably charged me for that. But let me back up a minute. So let me just give you the brief history on 16 Handles. Founded in 2008, 16 Handles' big aha moment was like, how do we bring self-serve frozen yogurt, or we should bring self-serve frozen yogurt to New York, where Pinkberry and Tasty Delight were kind of winning and saturated the market, but those are both full-service dessert shops. Full-service dessert, because full-service dessert is different than full service. And those two had a significant footing. And so it was just like, hey, that self-serve concept is working on the West Coast. Somebody should bring it to New York. And that was the idea with 16 Handles back in 2008. Thanks to an endless topping bar. You guys have seen these kind of places, right? The big topping bar, you pay by weight, right? So thanks to that, really good product, and just being at the right time, in the right place, the brand became super popular. It was kind of the second wave of frozen yogurt is, if you read the traditional press, that's what they'll call it. And 16 Handles was a really big hit. And then organic franchise inquiries came in to the founders, and they started to expand that way. Basically, the value proposition being that it was an artisan frozen yogurt, lots of toppings, comfortable atmosphere, and then, of course, being self-serve, cheap labor, and easy to build, basically an automated business. And so the branded and most successful point was looking at around 40, 45 units, a big UAE development deal, and then all of a sudden it just stopped innovating and everything stopped happening. And that happens a lot with brands. But active management turned to passive management with the founders, who at that point were still the management team. And then the system uniformity went down. And system uniformity has to be controlled by franchisor, as you guys know as franchisors. But there was one shop in New Jersey that added bubble tea. There was another shop in upstate New York that they said, well, we'll get our own distributor and serve a different product because it's cheaper. And then another guy in New York City, the franchisee there, he got so angry with them, he just didn't want to report sales anymore. He got a different POS. He just put his own POS in. And it's like, it sounds crazy, but it's not. It happens in franchise systems, and when you have passive management and you aren't taking control and being the leader that your franchisees need, things happen. And it doesn't happen all at once, but it just compounds over and over again and across a system that's spread out over multiple territories. And that was kind of the 16 handles that I experienced as a customer. When I lived in New York City, I worked in banking. So they had 9 locations. One was a block away from my apartment at the time. It was addictive Froyo. They had a decade of goodwill, a bunch of brand equity. And then as I would later come to find out, they were missing one thing, which is active management and kind of passion for the brand. So when I first sat down with the CEO, I had resigned from my finance career for a different company that I was working on at the time. And it was so weird. It's like I spoke to other franchisors and they had this whole discovery day pitch. And then these guys, just like, it was like we were sitting at one of these tables and that was their discovery day pitch. It was just so awkward. And I realized they were just lacking energy. They didn't have like a clear outline of what comes next. Like, what does joining this franchise look like? Because I'm a customer, I know what the store looks like, but what is the process here for building a store or something? And it was just the most complacency I've ever seen. And so instead of walking out, where I'm sure other people went to Discovery Days with 16 Handles, it was a well-known brand in New York City, most of those people probably walked out. But I said, this is an opportunity. If I join this franchise, compared to all the other franchises I was talking to, I could be a leader. I could help make decisions, and I could actually, change the way things are operating. So when I went into the stores that I went into and I saw these things that I was like, hey, it's kind of weird that they do it that way, but whatever, it's their store. I knew that with this kind of franchise, I could actually fix those issues. And that was attractive to me because I've always been an operations person. I've always liked fixing issues. And so I saw the opportunity. It was a well-groomed, it seemed better than being part of a well-groomed system. So instead of taking the risk, though, and building a new store with no guidance on that, I de-risked myself. I basically put in an offer on one of the existing stores that I went to as a customer because that was the store that I knew. And so, these businesses typically trade between 2 and 4x multiples. So I offered 2.5 EBITDA, contingent on a landlord assignment. That way I always had an out, but also because your lease in a retail business is the most important thing you could possibly have. So you need to make sure that works. And for me, it was extending the lease real long, seeing if there was any negotiability in real estate taxes, resetting the base here, things like that. And then, always having an out, so having an assignment clause within the newly assigned lease. And what else? I offered a bunch of little random things in my deals, and I call them kind of mystery terms. So I put in a gift card liability, an inventory credit. It's just like asking you won't get on these kind of business terms. Sometimes the seller thinks that you have a reason you're asking for things you're asking for. When you don't, you're just like, hey, even though I'm going to offer you this much, I want to pay a few thousand less. And so you're always negotiating in these things. So we eventually come up with a deal. We signed an LOI, but it was a lot of money. I mean, I think this store, it was probably over $500,000, which I didn't have in my bank account at the time. I worked in finance. I got a good bonus, but I didn't have that cash. But I still signed the LOI because I knew I was going to get a loan for it. And I went to JP Morgan Chase and spoke to a banker, but I walked in there and I knew I was going to get a loan. And I think that's the reason. I was just on Fox Business and the Liz Clayman was talking about how hard it is to get a loan right now and that it's so low. I think a lot of the reason is because people go in and they're questioning themselves on whether they even deserve this. If you have a good business that cash flows, you can raise money for it. It's not hard. And obviously everybody knows debt is cheaper than equity. And so it's like raise debt. And the SBA created the SBA 7A loan, which is to buy a cash flowing business with as little as 10% down, specifically for these kind of businesses. So when I went to the banker, I knew I was going to get a loan. We went through the due diligence. I'm skipping a bunch of bureaucracy here. It sucks getting a loan. I'm making it sound great. There's the value, the values, all the due diligence, every tax return you've ever possibly submitted. It's a bunch of BS, but you just deal with it because at the end of the day, we closed on that transaction and I owned my first store. and I had never worked in food service personally, so it was a whole new experience for me, but it was fun. So I bought this as a turnkey business. I had been to the store multiple times. It was supposed to be more of like a, hey, I'll introduce myself, but the old owners were passive, I'll still be passive and just have a few ideas here and there. It's always awkward, especially this is a young group, so I can say this because other groups don't really get this. A lot of employees in these types of stores are young, and then when ownership is also young, there's always this awkward transition and meeting phase, and so I think you just have to be really clear and concise has been my best advice on this one, is it's like, hi, I'm Neil. I invested in this store because I think it's great, but it can be better. And my background is working in finance and working on these multi-million-dollar deals, and here's how this experience lends itself into this store. And I first saw 16 Handles as a customer in that store, and I thought the product was so good, and now we're gonna turn this into a higher revenue center, we're gonna build stronger roots with our community, and we're gonna fix all the problems that you probably complaining to your old boss about, but nobody was listening. And if you do that, then you can kind of get past the age thing, and they understand that you are the new boss, and that's just something I've learned through kind of buying these types of businesses before. And the unsurprising lesson with this store is it wasn't turnkey at all. I was supposed to leave for a dinner on that first night. I never ended up leaving the store. I closed with the team. Then I was there the next morning, and ultimately I was there every opening and closing and shift in between for 3 months. And that's when I learned the business. And that's what it takes. And a lot of that time was spent working the register. So that I can meet the customer and really understand who exactly that customer is. Because you get data, right? We know on our email list, we have birthday signups, gender. Okay, so I know who my target audience is. But that's totally different than knowing who your customer is when you're actually working at the register or preparing deliveries. And by doing this, I found a bunch of inefficiencies and a bunch of operational things that I could fix and labor that I could save. And it all compounded on each other, and I realized that this was a way bigger opportunity than I had even thought I was getting. And so I ended up saying, you know what, I want more of this. But first, some lessons from my single unit operations. When you have one location, you're the face of the brand. Like as the owner, you need to be at your store, and you need to be the face of the brand. So that kind of goes into meeting your customers. And then the other thing is you're never below any position in that store, especially when you're a single unit owner. It's like if you're not willing to wipe sprinkles on a Saturday night at 2 a.m. from whatever counter you're wiping them from, then you shouldn't be the owner of that place, and you shouldn't have employees, and it just doesn't work out. And the other thing is sticking to a budget when you don't really know the business you're in. You set that budget based on industry principles or whatever it is, and don't stray from it. It's like the people who lose money are the ones who saw this opportunity come up, you could use credit card point back systems with us and we'll finance you and whatever. And so you sign up for it, and all of a sudden they're taking 50% of your revenue, and you thought it was a good marketing. It's like, don't do any of that stuff. You're just learning your business. Stick to the budget and do your business. So, like I was saying, I came from one store into a multi-unit owner. I put an offer and kind of rinse and repeated to buy another store in Chelsea, use the distributions from the profits from the first store to pay for it, and then the next one. And so now I was a 3-unit owner. I had multi-unit economics on my side. They were all cash flowing businesses. They just needed good management, and there's going to be a big upside. And so I'm going to skip a little bit about my time kind of managing those 3 stores, but that was basically a full summer winter cycle, and talk a little bit about the lessons I learned during that. So when you become multi-unit, you really need to spend time wisely, in the sense that I found myself getting stuck on repair and maintenance tasks all the time. It was an AC went down here, a yogurt machine went down here, and this one, the internet's broken. And then as soon as you fix the internet at that one, the internet breaks at that one. And it just happens in these kind of businesses, and especially with minimum wage and lower earning employees, they don't have skin in the game. They don't really care if they accidentally unplug something, and so they don't realize when they do. And then all of a sudden you have to go there to plug it in because nobody else can find which cord got unplugged. But if you make that your entire job as a multi-unit owner, then everything else is going to go to shit. Sorry for lack of better words. But yeah, it's like you can't be dealing with emergencies all the time. You need to create partnerships at this stage. And it's like you need to overinvest into vendors that you want to work with, at a pest control company, a window washer, garbage men, but also an HVAC guy, and whatever it is that you need for your business. It's like as soon as you get into multi-unit economics, you need to have those on speed dial. Otherwise, you can't spend any time with your employees or with your customers. And speaking of employees, you only get to be a momentary leader with employees. Or that's how I felt with 3 stores. Is I would get to spend maybe 15 minutes with an employee before I'd have to jump to another store, jump to another thing, and I might not see them again for 2 months because just shifts never crossed or whatever. So you need to make sure you're spending all your time with the employees really well, and you really focus on the A team players. There's going to be B team players. I could give this speech and say, hey, you need to only hire A team players and fire all the B team. It's like there's going to be B team and C team players at these types of stores. It just happens. But if you focus on the A team players and spend your time with them, they'll help trickle it down to the lower employees, the lower caring, less motivated employees. And it does add up and compound itself. But it's difficult to really know your employees and hire them, and then all of a sudden not know your employees because you're spending so much time with multiple units. So at this point, COVID happened. I'm going to skip the NYC COVID BS. It happened. It is what it is. We all dealt with it, and it's sad to think about. But on the flip side, of course, there's out of adversity comes opportunity, right? And for me, that was taking new leases across New York City. This was my Tribeca space that I started building. At some point, I bought yogurt shops were closing everywhere, which was great for me. I kept buying their machines. At some point, I bought like $50,000 worth of machines with absolutely nowhere to put them. And that's what happens is opportunities come up. Somebody had told me this at some point, is like, as you grow, these opportunities will fall in your lap. And they just don't happen, until you get there. And it didn't make any sense to me. And then all of a sudden, I guess I got there, and I was getting a text from a random number that a shop's closing and take these things. And I was like, sure, I'll wire today. So it might not make sense, but it will as you continue to grow and scale your business. And for me, it seemed like a really good time to keep growing. So a lease in Times Square came up for a similar concept that had closed down. And I said, this is going to be a fun store to build because I don't have to build it. I just have to put lipstick on it and make it my brand. And yeah, that was how the Times Square deal came together for me, which is now the flagship of our brand. But the problem at the time is I'm still a franchisee. And so I keep saying our brand. But 16 Handles wasn't my logo at the time. I was just a franchisee borrowing it. And I think this is a feeling that a lot of multi-unit, or especially at this point I was the majority franchisee in 16 Handles feel, is they do a lot of the work. They make key decisions on how to keep building stores, what materials to use, what vendors to use. But at the same time, they don't own it. And so I was working tirelessly. And of course, I earned my revenue at my stores, but the brand that I was hanging up in all these new locations wasn't mine. And I think it really is a sentiment across a lot of franchise systems that have, bigger franchisees. And one that today I work really hard to combat with my franchisees, because as a franchisor, if you're providing value to your franchisees on a day-to-day basis, not just even the build-out, but on the ongoing side, and you're negotiating their vendor contracts and you're getting them benefits and giving them value add, then you have a good relationship. But as a stagnant franchisor who just says, oh, we grew up to this size and now it will just grow itself on its own, you're doomed to fail because the franchising relationship has to be symbiotic. A franchisor is not just a logo. And so I'm going to fast forward again. At this time, I wanted to diversify because I now had 5 16 handles in my portfolio, and I had this sentiment with 16 handles and the franchisor thing. But I had found this niche market I was successful in. So I thought the way to synergize is to stay in frozen dessert. And so I opened up the flagship Dippin' Dot store with those folks, Madison Square Park. Super successful story. A lot of fun, and then we opened that store on a little bit of a time crunch because 3 days later, I left. 3 days after we grand opened, I left on a 15-hour flight to finish up a project that I'd started 5 years earlier. And so that meant leaving control of now a brand new store, plus 5 totally other stores in a different concept, to a district manager who had grown with me over the years, basically from the beginning, who I trained into my mini-me, which as you grow, you effectively need a you when you can't be there. And so I had found that person, I had trained him, and ultimately I wanted to reap the benefits of the successful empire that I built. And the reason I work so hard, when I work is obviously to make money, and it's to make people happy too, but it's to make money so I could spend it on the things I want to spend it on. And for me, one of those was going out to Nepal with some friends and climbing Everest. And so to hit on those lessons of growing as a franchisee, as you grow, this is kind of the same sentiment, but you inevitably spend less time in each store and less time with your customers. You actually, it's contradictory, but you become out of touch with the concept you're growing as you grow, because you become more focused on the real estate. You become more focused on the vendor relationships and different negotiations instead of the customer aspect. And that's fine if you have the right people, but when you are in the stores, your impact matters more. Small decisions really send ripples when you're a larger franchisor, and your employees look to you, and what you do on the moment that they see you really does matter a lot. And so, maintaining customers and customer relationships and team relationships. Relationships are really important. And no matter how bad things get, you really can't burn bridges because you never know when things will come back, and you can't expect the spirals that sometimes happen. I mean, I hated Toast. Everyone knows Toast, right? The POS company. I lost my cool with them so many times over some simple things, and now I love Toast. They're my favorite company that I ever work with. We have the best discounts for our franchisees. We can onboard new franchisees so well. We use their payroll. It's like I feel like I work for Toast now. But you just don't know how things play out. And in this industry, it's not that big. It's the same vendors coming around and going around. And even when companies fail, it's like all of a sudden their team is somewhere else. And people stay within franchising. So the relationships really matter. And the other thing that I felt is a lot of times as a multi-unit franchisee, I was put in this position where I had to apologize on someone else's behalf, whether that was my employees or my managers or my store to the franchisor, whatever it is. At some point as a multi-unit franchisor, you just have to kind of take it and accept it and apologize and say sorry for things you didn't do wrong. And that was something that took me a little while to learn. But you're growing the business, and to grow the business, you need those relationships. On the strategic side, don't grow too fast. It's so stupid because everyone says it and everyone hears it over and again, but it's so true. And having done it a little bit myself even, it's really hard to know when you're choosing bias because you feel good about something versus something's consciously a good decision. And it becomes harder as it gets easier to grow, and access to capital gets easier. And all of a sudden you just are like, I'll put a store here and here and here. And you at some point have to reflect and even say no to things just because you don't know. So yeah, being strategic at a larger stage is super important. Working with a bookkeeper, if you aren't already, you need to have reports. You need to have something that you can hold to. At some point, if you just leave it on QuickBooks and keep saying, I'll come back to it, you won't come back to it. So hire a bookkeeper. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. So where's my time? 11:40, cool. In January of last year, a friend texted me and said, famous dude at your store. And this was the famous dude outside my store holding a rat upside down, throwing it at one of his friends. Just happened to be outside my store. And then he went in my store and he got Froyo, and he showed that in the video too. Nothing to do with the rat, fortunately. And like the good brand ambassador I was for 16 Handles at the time, because I was the a franchisee, I said, oh my God, thank you so much for coming to the store. Next time you come to New York, let me get you some free Froyo. Maybe you can post about it to your big audience. And that was it. And this happens, occasionally as you grow, especially being in New York City with a strong brand presence. But then Danny and me started talking, and we were similarly aged. And kind of had a lot of similar values. It turned out that like a few DMs turned into a few texts. At some point, we got on a phone call. I was walking into a dinner with my friends. I stayed outside. It was freezing cold in January. I ended up missing the entire dinner. I was outside on a phone call with Danny while my friends were eating dinner inside. But at the end of it, we had a plan to buy 16 Handles. And so that seemed pretty cool. I guess the two questions is like why and how on the 16 Handles thing. So the why is kind of easy. Same store sales were going up. I felt that I was a big reason that was happening. The changes that I was making that both had ripples across the franchising system to the other franchisees, but also especially in my stores. And I had now built 2 of these concepts in New York, which is arguably one of the hardest places to build a store. And so I figured out how to make a scalable footprint and what the brand really should look like going forwards. Danny has a massive audience. Could that be helpful? Yeah, no shit. That's the why in a nutshell. How, of course, it's a cash flowing business. I went back to the bank and got a loan. With this deal, it's a much bigger deal. I still actually did use the SBA 7A program, so a big fan of that program. But in these kind of deals, a seller's note can always help bridge a gap, and that happened on this one. And then for collateral, we did have to post collateral. This was a 35-unit franchise, with system sales, quite high. So. There was still a lot of value to the franchisor. Even though they were passive and terrible managers of the franchisor, the franchise was still pretty successful. So for collateral, we had to go all in, and we did go all in. And I like that we went all in because we got to feel the pressure. We got to feel that stress and that pain and knowing that failure is a possibility, and that would literally take away everything that I have. And pain and stress are good. If nothing else, adversity teaches you that it teaches you to appreciate the good days, right? And so, we posted our collateral. We closed on the loan, and it was really hard. It was a 4 or 5 month due diligence process in this, and there was a lot of times where I think a lot of other people would have given up, and even I, convinced myself one night I would, and then the next morning I woke up and I was like, what the fuck, we're so close. But hard things are worth doing. Like growing a franchise, the goal here is to grow a franchise in an industry that some people say has hit its peak, and in markets that some people will say are oversaturated. It was never going to be easy, but neither was getting to the top of Everest or finishing a 560-mile triathlon. It's like things aren't easy, but you do them because they're fun. And so our approach in 16 Handles is to find really great franchisees using grassroots approach. We're going out to trade shows and kind of doing it the old-fashioned way. And we have tons of pipeline, but it's like we're actually being thoughtful as to, hey, let's not accept these single unit operators anymore. Let's do these multi-unit deals that we're really excited about in really great territories, because our next 15 builds are more important than anything else. If those all go well with multi-unit deals, then all of a sudden we'll expand and we'll have 150, 250 units within a few years. But if we let a mom and pop open here and a mom and pop open, it's like, I don't know. It's hard to grow that way. It works when it's organic, but when we're really trying to scale this thing and we have a lot of brand power and brand equity now, higher AUV than any of our competitors, it's like the product should sell itself. We don't want to be selling it. And so that's where we're at. And we know what our franchisees, or we know what franchisees we need, but they don't necessarily know that they need us or what they're looking for. Right? Is who your ideal franchisee is, but when you go to a trade show, all the people there, they don't know what franchise they're looking for. And so it's been a really interesting process of figuring all that out and kind of trying to create this really collaborative system. On the tech side, brand portals and everything we could redo, we've redone. Every vendor we could work with, we've worked with. On the marketing side, we're just nonstop doing this creative stuff that doesn't cost a ton of money. We're not just pouring money into Facebook ads, hoping that it works. But yeah, I mean, I like one thing really nice that happened with our last deal in Texas for a franchisee is he asked us. I asked him, are there any other questions? Because we went through a bunch of questions, and he asked us, oh, why did you choose me? And I thought that was a really beautiful moment, because it was like we did a good job with the product to the point where he didn't feel like he was sold on it. He felt like this was the perfect opportunity for him, and he has to join us. And that's what franchising should feel like. It shouldn't feel like a sale if you have a really great franchise. So I think to finish this up, what attracted me to franchising in the beginning, and probably many of you, is that it's scalable, right? It's like you can go from one to really big, and obviously you read stories about multi-millionaires who made it all in franchising, and so the scalability is great. And I would have never started an ice cream shop or a frozen yogurt shop, but I saw that there was a cash flowing one, and I saw that it was operating inefficiently. And so now it was, how do I stretch every dollar to make more money off of it? And I like operations, and so this business is consistent decision making and refining and operations. And if you want to grow, it's like you have to put out some risk, and I've always liked that because it puts that stress on, and then you have to be better than your competitors. And if I learned anything throughout my experience, more than anything else, it's really just show up and bust your ass. Oh no. There we go. There's a few. Well, I get asked a lot is why do I climb mountains? Why do I do these stupid long triathlons? And I don't really have a great answer. There's an answer that I hear consistently that goes something like, if you have to ask, you just wouldn't get it. And I think that one's so funny because it's basically somebody admitting, hey, I don't have an answer either. I just like doing it, but in the most cocky way possible. But but the other answer that is anecdotal that I do like a little bit more is if you don't go to the edge, you'll never see the view, because it's kind of true on a deeper level. If I've learned anything through my adventures, both work and play, nothing beats hard work. As a franchisee, you have sleepless nights, you have sore feet. not very different than exactly what I'm doing in these long races. And as a franchisor, you're put in these really tough negotiations and really strange positions with constant, relentless pressure and stress. But stress and pain go away. And if you keep pushing, if you keep getting better, you don't remember the sacrifices you made, and then you find these opportunities that you could have never predicted coming up. And you know, for me, it's put me now in acquiring the franchisor, and I get to spend my whole day doing, you know, spending time working with franchisees, and it's a whole new set of circumstances, but I'm setting bigger goals than I did last year, which are, you know, were bigger goals than I set the year before, and that's just what starts happening when you're talking about a scalable business. And, you know, I didn't end up on the cover of two of franchising's largest publications because, like, dumb luck last month. I think it's that I outworked my competitors. When Franchise Times came to Fishman PR and said they wanted to do a piece on social media influencers and franchising, this was supposed to be a piece with a lot of different people in it. But I gave them such a good story when they came to interview us that they made us the cover and dropped every other I don't know, company, I guess. And it's like, if you just outwork your competitors, and you work real hard in this industry, I think you really can be successful. And so every day I get to wake up and do a job I enjoy doing. I get to use my, you know, hone in and use my skill set, which I think is, you know, especially in operations. And what's cool is I get to create wealth, not just for myself, but also for my franchisees. So really, if there's anything you could take away, it's like, whatever's on your to-do list, go do it now, because franchising moves really quick. Deals move quick. When you're a franchisee, you expect the most from your brand because you're investing your future into them. It's not like a job where, okay, you can go get another one. You're literally spending more on these businesses than you will on your house a lot of times. And so as a franchisor, you have to understand that. You have to give full attention to your franchisees. And so you have to be done with whatever task you need to be done with, so you have that capacity and that time. And then you can build them a store that fulfills their dream, and it can help pay their college, you know, their children's college tuition, and it really changes a family and a community. And so being a good franchisor, I think, is a hybrid balance of compassion, of having the expertise in your industry, and of hard work. And with the power of a scalable brand, franchising really can unlock a symbiotic relationship and an opportunity to create wealth and lifestyle to a lot of people in a lot of communities. And with that, I think I have a few minutes for questions.
All right, everybody. This is on. Perfect. Thank you, Neil, so much. We really, really appreciate it. And again, another round of applause for Neil, guys. Really, really great. So I want to make sure that I ask a question that I think is probably on everybody's mind. You know, with having somebody like Danny Duncan, who is certainly, you know, somebody who has quite a large following. You know, a lot of people are in here probably thinking, I may not have somebody like that just like doing a video outside of my store. And we're going to get into this today. This is a big theme this morning, folks. This is all about viral content, and I think how to use short form content. And you'll hear this as a recurring theme throughout consumer marketing, throughout franchise development marketing. That's our next speaker. So you guys will hear all about that, but I want to make sure that Neil answers, you know, how are you guys utilizing Danny in a way where it's not like overpowering, where it's all about him, but you're using it in a smart way?
Yes. So if you don't have a Danny, which most brands don't, there's kind of two questions here. It's like, why? I didn't have a Danny. I didn't know who he was until I got a text that he was at one of my stores throwing a rat around outside in New York City. But it's like, you kind of have to find those people. They're not going to find you, most likely, especially if you want them to work for your brand. But then once they do, it's like, Danny is not 16 handles, and we made that very clear from the beginning. Is this brand? He is just a marketing tool to get his audience to know about the brand, and to use his expertise on social media, and really organic social media, and YouTube and short form video and whatever, to bring more traffic to 16 handle stores. On the franchising side, though, he's not a huge asset to help, and we don't use him that way or his audience that way. It's more of millions of people who are sitting at home watching his videos, and if they see 16 handles in that, and then they see a 16 handles open in their local town, they're gonna go. And so the short answer is like, does influencer marketing sell franchises? Not in our specific industry, I don't think. And so it hasn't really been utilized that way yet. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? And I'm going to do my best to try and run across the basketball court here to get to you, where Ryan apparently is going to do it. So I think I see one in the back through the lights, and then I've got red as well after that.
50% of the revenue today is the units we own, very similar to you, and then
Yep.
a rapidly growing franchise business. So do you still own all the corporate stores, or do you find you can't be all things to all people, and the balance between running the OpCo and being the franchisor is just not the same business? So we're going through that right now. So I'd be interested to know how you're dealing with that.
I had to think about that one a lot. So I have 7 16 handles in Manhattan, which right now, yes, I still own their affiliate or corporate stores. That being said, a lot of stores I don't get to see for months at a time, and I just hear about through district managers, and that's not a great way to necessarily manage it. Now, my district manager is great. He's been with me for 4 years, so having good management is the tool to being able to do that. That being said, the reason that I will keep them and not sell them as a cash flowing franchise business to join our system is I want that touch point as a franchisor. I like the pitch of that I own the stores that I'm going to sell, but I also like the fact that I actually know the stores and the business to its core. And when I charge somebody's royalties check at the end of the month, I effectively know how much is in their bank account, and I know that it's worthwhile to pay these royalties because the revenue that they're getting. And so for me, owning the franchised locations of my own brand are worthwhile, but it is very hard to manage because I need to spend my time on the exit value. Just being 100% real here, the exit value on a franchisor is way higher than the 2 to 4 times on a store, and that is where my goals are. So, it's a lie to say like I really care about my stores. I want them to be successful, but I can't spend all day in them, and I can't deal with a lot of the problems that happen on the day-to-day business. So I'm keeping them because I like the touch point, because when I do get a free day here and there, I go spend it at the store. But it's good management, and I overpay my managers now because that way I don't have to deal with it as much.
So early on then, is the cash flows from the OpCo still funding the growth of the franchisor at the same time? Or have you gotten to the point where the franchise side is self-funding in terms of like funding growth in the franchise?
No, it's separate for me. I keep the operating companies of my individual stores completely independent from franchisor entity. So no, royalties are growing the franchise right now.
Neil, we heard how you met Danny and you started DMing, you start texting, you have this long hour call. How did the idea of partnering come together? Who broached it first, and then ultimately taking over the Zor together?
So when he went to my store, the one thing he said that was interesting, he's like, it's the cleanest frozen yogurt shop I've ever been to. It turns out Danny likes frozen yogurt a lot. And I told him like, oh yeah, I really focus on these things. This is what I'm doing, and blah, because it was, and he was like, oh, cool, so you own the brand. I go, well, no, not yet. And at this point, I was working on acquiring the franchisor. So that was kind of in the back of my head. And he said it really, really loosely, why not? And I was like, oh, I don't have an answer for that one. I guess it was the money at that stage and kind of coming up with the final deal and the final terms. Because coming out of COVID, it was very hard to value a business. Do you value it on 2019, or do you value it on a combination of the last 3 years, or, especially in New York City. So it was effectively taking that why not and being like, well, here's all the things that are good about buying this franchise, but also these parts of it will be tough. and it just somehow turned into, it was just like the opportunity came and we jumped on it, and that was it. There's not like I didn't say anything specific, he didn't say anything specific. It just made sense and we meshed well, and that's how deals should come together, is the deals that come together really quickly are the deals that work. The ones that like it's a 3-month negotiation on a lease, going back and forth over what's the break point of a % rent or something. It's like those are the deals that suck. And like half the time don't even close, so everyone wastes their time. But a lot of these successful, business transactions for me were all like 1 to 2 days. That Times Square lease, I put in an offer 6 hours after I saw the space, and we signed a lease like 2 weeks later. And I got a crazy good lease because it was the middle of COVID and the landlord just wanted to do something. And right now, I mean, I could go sell that lease for more than what I'm paying on it.
Awesome. Well, we have time for one more question. All right, I'm going to run to you, Lucas. Give me a second.
Neil, do you want to share some of your growth strategies for after taking over the franchisor and sort of what you guys are targeting? You grow slow mantra, or sort of somewhere in between?
Yeah, it's somewhere in between. It's growing slow in a quantity standpoint from franchisees. I don't want like 20 new franchisees, but we do want to grow 15, 20 units a year. This year, and that's what we're on track for. We have a bunch of stores under construction. I'm flying out today to go to Naples for a grand opening of a store there. The strategies for growth. I think the biggest thing that we've had success with is going out into communities and doing the trade shows, because our franchisor deck speaks so well to us. It's just, we have a higher AUV, we have a better value prop, we have a better graphic designer. Our competitors, Menchie's or what is it, Tutti Frutti, they have mascots of like stupid little ice cream things. And it's like, they're attracting kids. Who wants to own a business I'm sure there are people who want to, but I don't. And a lot of people, it's like, it's kind of a joke, and we're like the serious upscale brand in that, and it's a very easy sales tactic for us. So it's just getting in front of the people we want, specifically in the neighborhoods where we're already looking for real estate and we know we want to be. So we're kind of coming in and doing our research and spending capital before we even find the franchisees. And I think that's why we've had a really successful turnaround, is when they're looking at other franchisors, whether it's in our industry or others, nobody can match the work that we're putting into it. And yeah.
All right, folks, the PR person's pulling the hook. Thanks again, everybody, and thank you to Neil. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we are going to be back on, and music will be playing, so you guys will know it is happening. Personal branding is the next subject, so just stay tuned for that. 10 minutes. Thanks again to Neil.